Are you serious? Are you serious? This is crazy. Or is it? The giants that used to live on the earth. Genesis chapter 6, when the fallen ones, when the sons of God looked upon the daughters of men and saw they were fair, and took them wives as they chose, and they bore them children, men of great renown, giants in the land. This happened before the flood and after, according to the scriptures. And these giants used to roam the Holy Land: Canaanites, Hittites, Jebusites, Moabites, Amorites, Perizzites, termites, whatever, all the ites. But we have some new archaeological discovery in Laos that is shocking. Matter of fact, what timing? This just came out. It was on last night. Even George Norrie talked about it on Coast to Coast AM radio. And L.A. Marzulli is going to be my guest tonight, talking about Nephilims and his brand new second film on mound builders coming out tonight. Well, he's going to be our guest tonight at 10 p.m. Don't miss it, L.A. Marzulli. But more, and I'm going to ask him about this question. More than 100 giant stone jars thought to have been a burial ritual thousands of years ago have been rediscovered at an ancient site in the forest on the hillsides along mountain ridges in remote Laos. What? The carved stone jars are scattered across miles of the rugged tiger-hunted province of Laos, about 200 miles north of Laos's capital. They have been dubbed the Jars of Death. Why? Well, researchers have found several human bodies thought to be around 2,500 years old have been found in some of the jars. And get this, guys, these jars are 10 foot tall so they could contain the bodies. What does that mean? Were these Nephilim? Were these giants? Skeletons inside the jars? Were the skeletons around 9 foot tall? Well, there has been, here's the thing about it. Nobody knows anything about these people who originally made the jars. An expedition of archaeologists from Laos and Australia visited the region in February and March of this year to document these jar sites and to search for new jars of the dead. That's what this is called, the Jars of the Dead. The new finds show that mysterious culture that made these stone jars was geographically more widespread than previously thought, according to archaeologists at Monash University in Melbourne, Australia, and one of the expedition leaders. Okay, the largest and best-known jar site is the famous Plain of Jars, located in a relatively open country near the towns of Phosavan. That site contained about 400 carved stone jars, some as tall as 10 feet, weighing more than 10 tons, and the first archaeological investigation of it was made back in the 1930s. Those skeletal remains were removed from the jars. Imagine that. How many times did the Smithsonian Institute take the skeletons of believed to be giant remains and never revealed them to the population, to the public? This happened in Rockwall, Texas. This happened in Ohio. That happened in Indiana. It's happened all over the world. But now more jars have been discovered in Laos. And according to Live Science, the search for new jar sites took the expedition to an extremely rugged, very forested terrain where it's dangerous up there, actually. Researchers look for the ancient relics reported by local people. Relying on local knowledge meant the archaeologists could avoid the ever-present danger of the unexploded Vietnam War-era bombs that are still planted. And the U.S. warplanes dropped an estimated 270 million cluster bombs in Laos during the Vietnam War. Laos's government agency, that oversees the clearance efforts reports that more than 80 million of these bombs were unexploded and are still laying there, scattered across the country. So it's very dangerous to go into that area looking for these jars. The latest expedition is additionally to accurately mapping many of the reported sites. They found 15 new sites containing a total of 137 new ancient stone jars. Shannon said that the newly discovered jars were similar to those found in the plain of jars, but some varied in that they were made from their shapes and the way the rims of the jars were formed. But local legends include a story that the enormous stone jars were made by giants. This is the local legends. Said that the enormous stone jars were made by giants who used the vessels to brew beer to celebrate victories during war, would also use them for burial. But archaeologists think that at least some of the carved stones were used to hold dead bodies for a time before they would be cleaned and buried. Now, although the remains of elaborate human burials have been found at some of the jar sites, archaeologists were not made for the purpose of the burials or that would be performed later. So the evacuations in 2016 revealed that some of the stone jars were surrounded by pits filled with human bones and covered by large carved discs of stone. These appear to have been used to mark the grave locations. The latest expedition also found burial discs and other artifacts. Those include several beautifully carved stones, decorated on one side of the kinetic circles, human figures and animals. Curiously, the stone discs were always carved side face down. Decorative carving is relatively rare at these jar sites. We don't know why some of these discs for burial have animal imagery and geometric designs. Strange. The excavations around some of the stone jars also revealed decorative ceramic and glass beads and iron tools and decorative discs that were worn in the ears and spinal wars for clothing making. Also, researchers also discovered several miniature clay jars that looked just like the giant stone jars. They were buried with the dead. And scientists will now use the data and photographs from the new jar finds to reconstruct the sites in virtual reality at the Monash University. Archaeologists across the globe can use the VR to examine the sites. So they found 137 new jars, over 10 foot tall. They have found some human remains, but are very vague about those remains. Local legends was these were giants that lived there. That's why these pots are 10 foot tall. They were huge, giant people living there and would use these jars for two phases. One, to brew beer in, to drink and celebrate, and two, to hold the dead bodies while ritual burial preparations were being made. Very strange situation. L.A. Marzulli will be my guest tonight. What does L.A. know about the jars? He may know exactly what these jars mean, but this is newly discovered. I don't think he's been to Laos. Now, L.A.'s been a lot of places. He's been all over these digging up bones, guys. He's been everywhere where these ancient giants have been buried, or ancient giants, pagan worship locations and temples and that kind of thing. So don't miss tonight's live broadcast at 10 p.m. Eastern with our good friend L.A. Marzulli. What? I'm going to talk about the stone jars and some other things today. Don't miss today's live broadcast. Starts at 12 noon Eastern. We've got 60 tornadoes. Now the death toll is beginning to rise, and the numbers of people injured, and there's dozens and dozens of people being rescued as we speak, as the water's rising and floodwaters and dangerous situations are developing throughout the Midwest, especially Iowa, Kansas, Missouri, St. Louis area, and all over the place. So we're going to, look, it's getting ugly out there. I'll be back with more in just a moment. Give your life to Jesus Christ. The Bible, the facts of the Bible are being discovered right before our very eyes.